Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're going to really dive deep into something that's been kind of fascinating me.
Okay.
The global response to President Trump's foreign policy in his second term.
Right.
And
yeah,
I don't know about you, but I've been reading all these articles, and it's like some people think he's, like this maverick shaking things up, and then others are like, oh my God, it's
chaos.
This is going to destabilize everything. So I think it'll be really interesting to kind of look at that.
Well, it is fascinating to see how different sources are portraying this.
Yeah.
I mean, some are really framing it as, America first is working, he's getting things done. He's putting America's interests first.
Right.
But then others are really concerned.
Yeah.
They're saying this is disruptive.
Yeah.
This is risky.
Yeah.
This could really damage America's standing in the world.
Right. And we've got, like the whole standoff with Colombia over the deportation flights. Then there's the Greenland thing. Like, who even...
Who would have thought it?
I know. It's like out of the blue.
Yeah, and then reclaiming the Panama Canal. It's like...
It's definitely not your typical foreign policy approach.
It's like a whole different playbook. And I'm trying to figure out, is it working? Is this good? Is this bad? I don't even...
Right. Well, and that's where I think this idea of 2x4 diplomacy is really helpful.
Okay. 2x4 diplomacy. I like that. Explain.
So it's basically, less about the kind of traditional diplomacy of negotiation and compromise and more about...
Like, do this or else.
Exactly. It's about using leverage, threats, tariffs, unilateral action, really kind of forcing the issue.
So let's sit down and have a nice chat and more.
Exactly.
Here's a 2x4.
Here's a 2x4. Do what I say. Wow. But, I mean, does that work? I mean, maybe short term, but...
Right.
What about...
That's the question term.
Yeah. Are you damaging relationships in the process?
Yeah.
And I think the Colombia situation is really a prime example of this.
Right. Because that was wasn't that all happening?
It was like
in the middle of the night on social media.
Middle of the night Twitter war. Yeah. It was crazy.
Yeah. And a bunch of top officials huddled at Trump's Doral Resort.
Yeah,
crafting this response. It's wild.
It's like something out of a movie.
But it worked though, right? Colombia backed down. They took the deportation flight.
They did. So it's like, okay, in that case, maybe it was effective, but what's the message that sends to everyone else?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, are other countries watching this and thinking...
They're taking notes?
Oh, we better do what he says or we're next.
Yeah, exactly. And you see that. Some countries are definitely like, all right, let's cooperate. Let's not poke the bear. Right, like El Salvador.
Exactly.
They agreed to take back not only their own citizens, but also gang members originally from Venezuela.
Which is a huge deal. And, it's interesting. Marco Rubio's first foreign trip as Secretary of State, El Salvador.
Oh, wow. So they're getting rewarded for playing ball.
It seems like it.
Okay, so some are going along with it. But what about the ones who say, no way?
Well, they're the ones getting the 2x4, right? Like Denmark.
Oh, yeah, the Greenland thing. They were not happy.
They were not happy. I mean, think about it, being told your country is for sale.
It's insulting.
It's insulting. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about feeling disrespected.
Right. Like you said, treated like an asset, not a partner. Even some U.S. lawmakers are like, whoa, hold on.
Oh, yeah. Senator Murkowski had that great quote, Greenland should be seen as an ally, not an asset.
Open for business, but not for sale. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good one. And I think a lot of other countries are watching this whole thing with Denmark, and they're thinking, okay, if he's willing to do that to them, what about us?
Yeah, it's like everyone's walking on eggshells, worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. So is this America First thing actually backfiring?
Well, that's what some of the sources are suggesting. It's like he's so focused on America First that he might actually be creating an America alone situation.
America alone, so pushing others away instead of pulling them closer.
Exactly, and we're already seeing signs of that.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, look at the Mercosur trade bloc and Mexico. They're strengthening ties with the EU and China.
So they're looking for other partners.
They are. And that could mean less reliance on the U.S. in the long run.
Wow. So it's not just about individual countries reacting to Trump. It's like the whole global system is shifting.
It really feels that way. Like we're at a tipping point.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, honestly.
It is a little bit, yeah. But also, I think, really fascinating to watch unfold.
True. Definitely keeps things interesting.
It's definitely a shift, yeah. And, what's interesting is this isn't just limited to Latin America, right? We're seeing this assertive 2x4 approach kind of play out all over the globe.
Right, like with the Panama Canal. I mean, he's talking about reclaiming it,
Yeah.
citing Chinese influence as this big threat.
Exactly. And it's like this echo of,
Yeah.
past U.S. intervention in
Yeah.
the region, like a modern-day Monroe Doctrine almost.
And he's even like hinting at using military force
Yeah.
to reclaim it. It's kind of unsettling. I mean,
Yeah.
I can only imagine how Panama feels about all this.
I bet. And then there's Russia, the conflict in Ukraine. Remember how he promised he'd solve it quickly?
He was going to go in there and do the
Part of the deal.
yeah.
Well, doesn't seem to be working so well.
Well, yeah, his peace plan was basically dead on arrival.
Pretty much.
And, the U.S. doesn't really import that much from Russia anymore, so he can't really use the whole tariff thing as leverage.
That's a good point. It's
Yeah.
like his usual playbook doesn't apply here.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the economic leverage or lack thereof,
Yeah.
It's also about soft power.
Yeah.
That whole idea of influencing other countries through culture and diplomacy.
Oh, yeah.
Traditionally, the U.S. has used both hard power, military, economic might, and soft power.
Right.
But it seems like Trump is really focused on the hard power side of things.
Like just forcing his will.
It's very transactional.
Yeah.
Very win-lose, not a lot of room for collaboration.
And we see this in the Middle East too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Even though his administration did help broker the ceasefire
Yeah.
between Israel and Hamas.
Although, to be fair, the groundwork for that was really laid by the Biden administration.
Oh, okay.
But even with that, I mean, he still managed to kind of
Stir things up.
stir things up, yeah. I mean, suggesting that Gaza should be cleaned out.
Oh, right.
Talking about Egypt and Jordan taking in Palestinian refugees.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember that.
And of course, both countries were like, no thanks.
Yeah, that would be it
Yeah,
here.
it's just not realistic. I mean, logistically and...
Right. And also just incredibly...
It's insensitive.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, he just doesn't seem to get the complexities of
The
his
nuances.
information.
Yeah, the historical baggage,
Yeah.
the sensitivities. It was just such a
Yeah.
tone-deaf move. It really alienated everyone involved.
Ah.
And it just kind of undermined any progress that had been made toward peace.
So it's like, even when there is potential for cooperation,
Yeah.
he somehow manages to
Mess it up.
mess it up.
Yeah, with the 2x4.
So now we've got potential allies feeling alienated. Adversaries are maybe feeling a little emboldened. And everyone's kind of like, what is going on? Is this the new normal?
I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely creating a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like trying to play a game where you don't know the rules.
Right.
And the rules keep changing.
And then someone's waving a 2x4 around.
Exactly. So, yeah, people are nervous.
And what does all this mean for the U.S.? I mean, could this actually make the U.S. weaker?
That's what a lot of these sources are saying. If you alienate your allies and you just rely on hard power all the time,
Yeah.
you create this vacuum
Right.
and someone else is going to fill it. China, for example, is more than happy to step in.
It's like we're watching U.S. influence slowly erode.
Yeah, it's a gradual thing, but I think it's definitely happening.
And what happens if that continues?
I mean, it could have huge ripple effects on everything. Trade, economic growth, global security, climate change.
I mean, it's kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, it is a bit,
Yeah.
but it's the reality we're facing.
So the big question is, what happens next? Does he just keep going with this?
Right. Does he double down? Does he change course?
Like, we're all just waiting to see what he does next.
Yeah, it's like a big game of chicken,
Yeah.
and the stakes are pretty high.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, we've covered a lot today. Let's do a quick recap before we wrap up. All right, so we've been talking about how the world is reacting to President Trump's foreign policy in his second term and how this 2x4 style is really shaking things up. Some countries are going along with it, like El Salvador and India, kind of like, okay, fine, we'll do what you want.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to stay on his good side.
Right.
Avoid becoming the next target.
Exactly. But it shows just how much power the U.S. still has, These smaller countries, they don't really have much choice.
Right. They don't have the same leverage. They can't really push back in the same way.
But then you have countries like Denmark and Canada who are basically saying, nope, we're not going to just roll over. They're taking a stand.
Yeah. Even though it could mean facing some consequences. It's interesting, though, because it shows that this 2x4 thing isn't a guaranteed win for Trump.
Right. It might work sometimes, but it can also backfire.
Exactly. And in the meantime, it's creating all this uncertainty and tension.
It's like no one knows what the rules are anymore. Every day it's something new.
And that's unsettling for everyone. It's like if you're constantly worried about someone hitting you with a 2x4, you're going to start looking for ways to protect yourself.
Right. You're going to find some friends who have your back, maybe build some walls.
Exactly. And we're seeing that happen, right? Like with the Mercosur countries in Mexico, they're getting closer to the EU and China.
It's like they're hedging their bets, looking for other partners they can rely on.
Yeah, because they're not sure they can rely on the U.S. anymore.
And that brings us back to this America alone idea.
Right. Is this America first thing actually leading to isolation?
I mean, it's kind of a scary thought. We always think of the U.S. as this, leader of the free world.
Yeah, the big guy on the block.
Right. But what if no one wants to follow anymore? What if they're like, actually, we're good over here, thanks?
That's the question we need to be asking. If this keeps going, what happens to the U.S.? What role does it play in the world?
Does it become a force for good? Or does it become something else entirely? Something maybe a little more unstable?
It's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there are any easy answers, but it's something we all need to be thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. This deep dive has really given us a lot to think about. It's like foreign policy isn't just some abstract thing, right?
Oh, definitely not. It affects all of us, even if we don't realize it.
It affects our lives in so many ways.
Exactly. From the prices we pay for things to our security, even our ability to travel.
So a more unstable world means a less safe world for everyone.
Yeah, it affects all of us. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to understand what's going on and to, ask questions.
And to think about the choices our leaders are making. All right, well, this has been quite a deep dive. We've seen how Trump's 2x4 style is reshaping the world, creating both opportunities and risks. It's a time of great uncertainty, but also, like you said, a time of great potential for change.
Absolutely. The future isn't set in stone. We all have a role to play in shaping it.
And that starts with being informed, engaged, and asking those tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we move forward, the big question remains. What role will the U.S. play in the future world order? Will it be a leader, a lone wolf, or something else entirely? That's something for all of us to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.